So how do we use carbohydrate energy? What happens to us when we consume carbohydrate energy? So let's talk a little bit. So here's our cell again. And inside our cell, we have a bunch of little circles in here. And I want you to imagine that each one of these little circles represents one glucose or one sugar. And then over here we have a leg muscle. And muscles are made up of lots of cells. But say we're running or something like that. And as we're running and we need energy to move, we start eating this glucose up one at a time. So over here you're seeing all your sugar being eaten up by the cell. So we've eaten up most of our glucose, and the cell says, hey man, we need some more of this stuff. Where are we going to get it from? And it looks at the blood. It says, blood, do you have any sugar in there for me? And the blood says, no, I don't have a whole lot of sugar in here. I only have a couple of pieces, and that's not good enough for you to keep running for another hour. The body looks at the stomach. And inside our stomach, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in probably the next lecture, I think we talk about this, we have this monster that lives in there that controls our appetite, and when our blood sugar is low, the monster rears its ugly head and just wants us to eat about everything and anything because it says, hey, we're starving, we have no sugar, and we got work we need to do. So what happens is we eat a Hershey bar. So to eat the Hershey bar, it goes into our stomach, we digest it, and the sugar goes up in our blood again. So the cell's saying, all right, man, you got the sugar all in the blood. Now give it to me because I'm the guy that needs it. You don't need it in the blood. And the blood wants to give it to the cell, but there's a big door on the cell. And the door has to open before the sugar can get inside of that cell. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it is an organ in your body called the pancreas. And it lives on the left side of your stomach, the left underneath your left rib cage is where your pancreas is, right around the same place where your stomach is. And it is the organ that holds the key to open this door, that fits into the door and opens the door so the sugar can go from the blood into the cell. And that's what happens. And now that key has a name, and you guys may have heard of insulin. And that's what we're talking about. The pancreas makes insulin. Without insulin, you could never get that sugar from the blood into the cell. Now, I want you to think of insulin a little bit differently if you've heard of insulin before, and if you haven't heard of it, I want you to always think of insulin this way. I want you to think of insulin like a squirrel holding that key. And there's that squirrel over there. And the reason why I picked the animal squirrel is because squirrels forage. They find nuts and berries, and they store them, and they hold them for a rainy day when you need them. And that's what insulin does. When insulin is running around in your body, it is storing things. It is taking sugar, it is storing it in cells. By the way, it stores so well that when insulin levels are high in your blood, it stops your body from being able to burn fat, and it makes your body much more likely to store fat. So insulin levels represent a well-fed state. So if we had a big Thanksgiving meal, after we ate all of it, our insulin levels would probably be very high. It's the holiday season. It's very likely that all of our insulin levels are high. Hopefully not everybody. So here's the little guy, and he's storing things away, and you could pretend the nuts over there are sugar. And he's taking the sugar, he's putting it in the cell like I just showed you. And then when the cell doesn't need any more, and we still have more sugar because we've eaten a lot of sugar, then the little rodent over there that forages takes all the sugar and stores it inside the liver. And the liver kind of acts like a bank, storing all this sugar. And then when the liver is full and there's no more room in the liver for it to have all this sugar, it then takes the sugar and converts it into a fat or a triglyceride and starts depositing triglycerides or fat into fat cells. So what happens to the liver and what happens to the fat cells as we have more and more and more and more of these little foragers, what do you think happens to the size of them? Well, they get bigger. And depends on your surgeon, but what most surgeons will recommend is that their patients go on a very low carbohydrate diet before they do a weight loss surgery. And the reason is the liver gets huge when it's loaded with sugar, because all that the liver is swollen with sugar and water, and when you go on a low carbohydrate diet, the liver can reduce its size up to 50 to 75%. And that's great for a surgeon because a big liver makes it very difficult for them to see when they're doing surgery and it's in the way. So your liver will get very small. I don't know if you've seen the movie Super Size Me or the documentary Super Size Me with Morgan Spurlock, where he's supersizing everything and eating a bunch of McDonald's, and he goes and gets his blood work and he sees that his liver tests are elevated and all the doctors are freaking out and they're saying, stop the diet, you're killing your liver. Well, what happens is when the liver gets full of all that sugar and it starts turning it into fat, the fat gets stuck in the liver and doesn't all go into the fat cells, and the body views that as a foreign substance, and the immune system starts to attack it, and it starts to fry the liver up, and you start to get elevated liver tests, and it can actually cause cirrhosis of the liver, much like drinking alcohol can. The medical term is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. You might have heard of a fatty liver. You might have had a fatty liver. Hopefully after your surgery, this stuff is all gone. I see it all the time. Nonstop I see these fatty livers, and they're much more likely in people who are diabetic. And we're gonna get into diabetes in a second here.